Commander John Avery stood at the edge of the great hall, his eyes scanning the room. The walls of the alien meeting chamber stretched high above him, shimmering with strange symbols that no human had yet fully deciphered. This place, far away from Earth, was a symbol of the delicate peace that humanity had worked so hard to establish with the galaxy's many alien species. But John had a job to do, to ensure that peace remained intact. He had been sent here on a mission to negotiate. The next step in the formation of an intergalactic alliance. The goal was simple: unite the many alien factions under a single banner, ensuring a shared future for all. But the path was never easy. The galaxy was vast, and each species had its own desires, its own ambitions. Some wanted power. Others craved freedom. Some wanted to remain hidden, away from human eyes. The air in the chamber felt thick, tense. There were representatives from several alien races in the room, each more different from the other than John could ever imagine. One was a tall, reptilian figure with glowing blue eyes. Another had translucent skin that shimmered like liquid metal. But none of these beings caught John's attention. He was too focused on the task at hand, trying to keep his mind on the negotiations. At the front of the room, an alien leader, known as Xylar, stood with his arms crossed. He was the most influential of the factions present, and John knew that Xylar's support would be key to ensuring the alliance's success. But just as John was about to step forward to speak, a heavy silence fell over the room. A door opened, and all eyes turned to the entrance. It wasn't the leader or the ambassador who entered. It was a woman. John blinked. He wasn't expecting anyone else, especially not an alien woman. She was led by two guards who kept their distance but stood close enough to shield her from any potential threats. John couldn't help but notice the way she moved. Graceful, yet purposeful. She wasn't someone to be ignored. Her skin was a soft shade of violet, with a hint of silver that sparkled under the light. Her long, dark hair flowed behind her like a river of night. She was beautiful, but it wasn't just her looks that captured John's attention. There was something in her eyes, something knowing. The moment she stepped into the room, John felt a strange sensation, as if his heart skipped a beat. He didn't understand why, but there was a pull in the air around her. It was as if the universe had paused for just a moment to recognize her presence. As she walked towards the center of the room, the tension that had filled the air seemed to dissolve. Her calm presence brought an odd sense of peace, and the alien leaders who had previously been on edge now stood still, as if they, too, were waiting for something. The woman stopped in front of John, and for the first time, he found himself speechless. She looked up at him with eyes that seemed far older than her appearance suggested. It was as if she had seen things no one could imagine, things beyond time and space. Then, to John's surprise, she spoke. Her voice was soft but clear, and it carried a sense of authority that John couldn't ignore. "I know you," she said. John's breath caught in his throat. The words echoed in his mind, but he had no idea how to respond. He had never seen this woman before in his life. He had never even heard of her, yet here she was, claiming to know him. The room fell silent. The other delegates watched in confusion, but John's mind was racing. He tried to steady himself, but his thoughts swirled with questions. Who was this woman? Why did she say that? What did she mean by it? John turned to Xylar, who had remained silent through this strange encounter. The alien leader's expression remained unreadable, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he too was unsure of what to make of the situation. I don't understand," John finally managed to say, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. "I don't know you. How could you know me?" The woman's gaze softened, and for a moment, John could see a flicker of something in her eyes. It was as if she were struggling to make sense of her own words. But then she spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. Your people and mine. We share a history, Commander Avery. A history that you have forgotten, but I remember it all too well. John's confusion deepened. Forgotten history? What was she talking about? He had never been told anything about an alien species with such knowledge, much less one that knew him by name. Before John could ask any more questions, the woman raised her hand, signaling for the room to remain silent. Her presence was undeniable, and somehow John couldn't bring himself to question her authority, even though everything inside him screamed that he needed answers. "I will explain everything soon," she said, her voice carrying an air of certainty. "But first, there are matters that must be dealt with. The fate of your people depends on it." The room remained still as John processed her words. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This woman, this alien, had come from somewhere far beyond what he understood. She held answers to questions John had never even thought to ask. And yet, there was something familiar about her, something that tugged at the edges of his memory, like a forgotten dream. As the woman was led to a seat in the front of the room, John felt his mind racing. Who was she really? And what was it that she knew about him, about humanity, that no one else did? The meeting was no longer just about peace. It had become something far more personal, and John couldn't shake the feeling that his entire life was about to change forever. The room was quiet after the woman's cryptic words. Commander John Avery stood frozen, his thoughts swirling. He had always considered himself a well-prepared negotiator, someone who could handle any situation that came his way. But nothing in his extensive training had prepared him for this. An alien woman, claiming to know him, speaking of forgotten history that John had no memory of. He felt as if the floor beneath him had shifted, and he was standing on uncertain ground. John's eyes turned toward the woman once more. She was seated at the front of the room now, her long violet hair flowing softly around her shoulders. There was a calmness about her, a peaceful aura that contrasted sharply with the tension in the air. The alien leaders had resumed their discussions, but John found it difficult to focus on their words. His mind was consumed by the woman's statement. "I know you." The words echoed in his head over and over. How could she know him? He had never seen her before in his life, and yet there was something about her, something so familiar, as if they were connected by something beyond reason. His pulse quickened as his curiosity deepened. After the meeting ended, John didn't follow the others out of the chamber. Instead, he stayed behind, waiting for the woman to make a move. He had to know more. There was too much at stake now, and the answers she held were vital. She noticed him as soon as he approached. Without saying a word, she stood and walked toward him. Her movements were graceful, almost fluid, as if she was gliding through the room. When she reached him, she stopped just a few feet away, her violet eyes locking with his. "You seek answers," she said softly, as if reading his mind. John's heart raced. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "I need to understand. Who are you? How do you know me?" The woman paused, taking a breath as if weighing her words carefully. Finally, she spoke again, this time with a deep sadness in her voice. "I am Lyra," she said, "and I am the last of my kind. My people, we were once connected to yours, in ways that even your history does not remember." John felt a chill run down his spine. He had never heard of a species like hers. The galaxy was full of alien races, but this was something entirely new. Connected? How? Lyra's gaze softened, and she motioned for John to follow her. Without another word, she led him to a side chamber where a holographic display flickered to life as she waved her hand. It showed a map of the galaxy, with lines connecting various star systems, lines that John had never seen before, places he had never heard of. "Long ago," she began, her voice distant. My people were not like the others you know. We were travelers, explorers, much like your own species. We came to your world long before the first humans stepped foot on this planet. And we shared something with you. John watched in silence as Lyra's fingers moved across the hologram, showing images of strange, ancient ships and symbols that were older than anything humanity had discovered. The images blurred for a moment before a new one appeared. A group of beings humanoid in shape, but with features unlike anything John had ever seen. They were standing together, their hands raised toward the stars, as if they were reaching for something beyond the galaxy itself. My people were protectors, Lyra continued, her voice growing heavier. We watched over humanity, guided you in secret. But then, things changed. There was betrayal from both sides. We believed in your potential, in the unity that could be achieved, but some of your kind sought to destroy us. John's mind raced. He had heard of galactic wars, of betrayals, but he had never imagined that such a story could involve humans. Betrayal? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded, her expression darkening. Yes, a powerful faction of humans. Those who wanted to control the stars attacked my people. They believed that they could wield our knowledge, our power for themselves. They didn't understand what they were doing. And it cost us everything. The room seemed to grow colder as she spoke. John's heart sank, and a deep sense of guilt washed over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow responsible, even though he had no knowledge of what had happened. The idea that humanity's past actions could have led to such destruction was almost too much to bear. I don't understand, John said, his voice filled with confusion and sorrow. Why? Am I involved in this? I've never heard of this story. Why do you say you know me? Lyra looked at him with a mixture of sadness and compassion. Because, Commander, your bloodline is connected to this history. You are one of the last descendants of the humans who once betrayed us. But you are also the one who can fix it. Your people are on the brink of repeating the mistakes of the past, and it's up to you to stop it. John's head spun. He had always considered himself a man of reason, of facts, someone who didn't believe in legends or forgotten histories. But this was different. There was a truth in Lyra's words, a truth that John couldn't deny. Somehow his past, his lineage, was tied to a war that stretched back centuries. I don't know how to stop it, John said, feeling more lost than ever before. I don't even understand what's happening. Lyra took a step closer, her eyes filled with determination. You will. The time for peace is running out, John. The forces that once sought to control my people are still out there, waiting. They've infiltrated your governments, your military. They want to use your planet's resources, your technology, to finish what they started. John swallowed hard, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. This was no longer just a diplomatic mission. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy, one that John never expected to be a part of. But now there was no turning back. The past had caught up with him, and he had to find a way to prevent history from repeating itself. I'll do whatever it takes, John said, his voice steady now. But I need your help, Lyra. We have to stop them before it's too late. Lyra nodded, a faint smile crossing her face. Together we can change the future, but first, we must uncover the truth, before they find us. John sat in the quiet chamber, his mind still processing everything he had learned from Lyra. The room was dimly lit, with only the soft glow of the holographic map illuminating the space. He had always believed himself to be a man of logic, someone who could solve problems with clear reasoning. But now, everything felt like it was slipping through his fingers. The truth about humanity's past, the war that had been fought long ago, and his own connection to it all. He didn't know what to believe anymore. He glanced at Lyra, who stood by the window staring out at the stars. There was a calmness about her, but John could sense that beneath the surface she was carrying the weight of something much larger. Something that, for all her wisdom and power, she could not face alone. "Are you sure about this?" John asked, his voice breaking the silence. He wasn't sure what he was asking, whether he meant her story, her powers, or the path they were about to take, but he needed to know that she was confident in what she had told him. Lyra turned her head slightly to look at him, her violet eyes reflecting the stars beyond the window. "I am sure," she said softly. "But even I don't have all the answers yet. There is much about this galaxy that we still don't understand." John leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to push away the headache that had settled in. The burden of knowledge was heavy, and it felt like it was pulling him deeper into a world he wasn't ready to face. "You keep saying that humanity is on the edge of repeating the mistakes of the past," John said, his voice low. "But I don't see how we can stop it. These factions you speak of, they're too powerful. We're just one group of people trying to negotiate peace." Lyra turned fully to face him, her expression serious. "You don't understand yet, John. This is bigger than negotiations. The power to change the future doesn't lie in the hands of the diplomats or the leaders. It lies in you. Your bloodline, your connection to my people, gives you the power to stop this before it's too late." John stared at her, his confusion growing. "How can my bloodline have anything to do with it? I don't even remember my ancestors being involved in this." "Your ancestors made a choice, John. A choice that led to the fall of my people," Lyra said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "But not all of them agreed with that choice. Some tried to stop the betrayal, but they were silenced. And now, that choice is coming back to haunt us. It's not just about stopping them. It's about undoing the damage they did." John's heart pounded in his chest. He had never believed in destiny or fate, but now, with Lyra's words hanging in the air, he felt like he had no choice but to follow this path. He had to stop the darkness that was spreading across the galaxy, no matter how impossible it seemed. "Okay," John said, standing up from his chair. "So what do we do now?" Lyra's eyes softened as she stepped closer to him. "Now, we need to unlock the power that has been hidden in your bloodline. I've been tracking the signs for years. Your connection to my people is the key. But it's not just about history. It's about the power you carry, the power that you've inherited." John felt a shiver run down his spine. "Power? What kind of power are we talking about?" Lyra raised her hand, and with a flick of her wrist, the air in the room seemed to shimmer. A soft glow filled the space as a faint energy began to hum, a ow vibration that John could feel in his chest. He stared at her in awe as the light grew brighter, yet never became harsh. It was a calm, soothing energy that seemed to pulse with life itself. "This," Lyra said, her voice soft yet filled with authority. "This is the energy that flows through my people, the energy that once connected us to all life in the galaxy. It's an ancient power, one that humans have long forgotten. But you can tap into it. You have the ability to awaken it within yourself." John watched, stunned, as the energy swirled around Lyra, illuminating the room. It wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. It was pure, natural, alive. He felt a sense of wonder mixed with fear. What kind of power was this? And why was it now, of all times, awakening in him? I don't understand," John stammered. "How can I have this power? I'm just a man. I'm not like you." Lyra smiled softly, as if she had been waiting for him to ask that question. "You are more than you think, John. The connection is there, deep inside of you, but you need to open yourself to it. You need to trust that it's real." John hesitated. He had never been someone to believe in supernatural forces or ancient energies. He had always relied on science, on logic, to explain the world around him. But now, standing before Lyra, he couldn't deny that something was changing. Something inside of him was awakening. "I don't know if I can," John admitted, his voice uncertain. "What if I can't control it? What if it makes things worse?" Lyra stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm, comforting. "You don't need to control it, John. You need to let it guide you. The power is not about force or control. It's about understanding, about balance. You are the key to that balance. If you can embrace your true nature, you can stop the forces that threaten this galaxy." John took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had no choice but to try. The stakes were too high and the danger too great. He had to protect his people, protect the future. And maybe, just maybe, the power Lyra spoke of could help him do that. "Okay," John said, his voice filled with determination. "I'll try." Lyra nodded. "Good. We don't have much time. The enemy is already moving, and the sooner you learn to control your power, the sooner we can stop them." John felt the weight of the moment, but also a spark of hope. For the first time, he wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for something greater, the future of the galaxy itself. The days following John's conversation with Lyra felt like a blur. He tried to process everything he had learned, but it was difficult to make sense of the pieces. His mind raced with questions. How was it possible that he had such power? Why had it awakened now? And why had Lyra chosen him? John spent hours with Lyra, learning more about her people and their ancient ways. She had taught him to focus, to feel the energy that flowed beneath the surface of everything. At first, it felt like nothing more than a strange tingling, like a whisper of something just out of reach. But as the days passed, John began to sense it more clearly, like a steady pulse beneath his skin. Still, he didn't feel in control. The power Lyra spoke of was vast, mysterious, and at times terrifying. How could a normal man like him possibly harness something so ancient? He wasn't sure, but he knew he had to try. The fate of the galaxy, the very future of humanity, depended on it. One evening, as John stood in front of a window overlooking the vast, star-filled sky, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Something was off. He wasn't sure how, but he could sense it in the air. The same tension that had filled the room when Lyra had first arrived. It was then that Lyra entered the room, her face serious. "John," she said softly, "they are moving." John turned to her, a sense of dread pooling in his stomach. "Who is moving? What do you mean?" "The factions that want to control the galaxy. The ones who betrayed my people long ago. They are gathering. Forces. They've infiltrated your world, your governments, and they are preparing for war." Lyra's voice was low, almost a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might make it real. John's heart sank. He had known that the threats Lyra had warned him about were out there, but hearing that they were already acting made the danger feel much more immediate. "But I thought you said we had time. You said we could stop them." Lyra nodded. "We still can, but time is running out. They know about you now. They know that you are the key to stopping them, and they will not stop until they have destroyed you and anyone who stands in their way." John's mind was spinning. He had always thought of himself as a diplomat, someone who negotiated, someone who could talk his way through any problem. But this was different. This was war. And in war, words often weren't enough. "What do we do?" John asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "How do we stop them before it's too late?" Lyra's eyes hardened. "We must find the source of their power. The leaders of these factions are not acting alone. Someone is pulling the strings, and we need to find them before they can launch their final attack." John nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He didn't know if he was ready for what was coming, but he knew one thing. He had no choice. He had to protect the galaxy, and that meant finding this mysterious leader before they could destroy everything. Over the next few days, John and Lyra worked together to gather information. They traveled to different planets, spoke with secretive sources, and pieced together the scattered fragments of a dark conspiracy. The deeper they dug, the more they uncovered. A secret rebellion within the ranks of powerful factions, each one determined to destroy the fragile peace between the stars. John had learned to trust Lyra, but the more they uncovered, the more he realized that this battle was bigger than they had thought. The rebellion wasn't just about power, it was about control. These factions wanted to reshape the galaxy, to wipe out anyone who didn't fall in line with their vision. And at the center of it all was a figure so dangerous, so powerful, that John didn't know if anyone could stop them. As the investigation continued, John began to feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. He wasn't just trying to stop an enemy, he was fighting against an entire movement, one that had been building in the shadows for decades. It was a fight for survival, not just for humanity, but for every species in the galaxy. John knew that the power Lyra had shown him was the key to stopping this, but he still didn't fully understand how to control it. Every time he tried to tap into it, it felt like something was holding him back, like he wasn't ready yet. But Lyra had faith in him. She believed that he could do it even when he wasn't sure himself. The tension in the air grew as the days passed. John could feel the storm coming, the fear of something terrible just on the horizon. And then, in the middle of one of their strategy sessions, they received a transmission. It was from a contact John had trusted, a high-ranking officer in the human military. The message was short, but it was clear. They're coming, and they know about you. John's heart skipped a beat. The rebellion was already on the move. They weren't waiting for the right moment. They were making their move now, and they were coming for him. "Lyra, what do we do?" John asked, his voice tight with urgency. "We prepare for war," she said, her voice steady. "We don't have the luxury of time anymore. They are ready to strike, but we will be ready for them." John stood up, his mind racing. The power that Lyra had shown him was the only thing that could stand against the rebellion. But he wasn't ready. He still didn't understand it fully. And yet there was no choice but to move forward. Together, John and Lyra began to rally their allies. They made contact with leaders from various planets, forming a small but determined resistance. Every ship, every soldier, every ally was crucial now. The rebellion was coming, and it was coming for them all. The pieces were falling into place, and John knew that the final battle was inevitable. He couldn't help but feel a sense of dread, but also a spark of hope. The galaxy's future rested in their hands, and somehow he knew they had to win, no matter the cost. The days leading up to the battle felt like a blur for John. The rebellion was no longer a distant threat. It was right in front of them. Each passing hour seemed to bring them closer to the inevitable clash. John knew that the time to act was now. The future of the galaxy depended on their success, but a growing sense of fear gnawed at him. They were facing an enemy that had been building for years in the shadows, and John wasn't sure if they were ready. The resistance they had formed was small, but it was made up of dedicated individuals from many different species. Together, they had gathered all the resources they could, ships, weapons, and supplies, but they were still outnumbered. John couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Lyra was at his side as always, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to John's anxiety. She was the one person he trusted, the one who had shown him that he was capable of more than he thought. But even she seemed to feel the weight of what was coming. Her powers, which had once seemed so mysterious and powerful, now felt like a fragile thread holding their world together. One evening, as John stood on the observation deck of their ship, Staring out at the stars, Lyra joined him. She had been silent for a while, her gaze fixed on the darkened horizon. The tension between them had been building, unspoken. But now, it was as if the air had thickened with something more than just the weight of their mission, something they both knew was coming. "John," Lyra said, her voice breaking the silence. "There's something we need to talk about." John turned to her, his heart pounding. He knew this conversation was coming. "What is it?" he asked quietly, though he already had a sense of what she was going to say. Lyra took a deep breath. "The power you've been learning to harness, it's not just a tool. It's a part of you, and it comes with a cost." John's stomach twisted. "A cost?" he repeated, his voice tinged with unease. "What do you mean?" Lyra's violet eyes met his, her expression serious. "The energy I've shown you, the force that connects us, it's not something that can be controlled without consequence. You can't simply use it without understanding the price. It's tied to the very balance of life itself." John's mind raced, but he remained silent, waiting for her to explain. "If you try to wield this power recklessly, it could destroy you," Lyra continued. "It can tear you apart from the inside, draining your life force until there's nothing left. I don't want that to happen to you, John. I've seen it before, too many times. The temptation to use power for the wrong reasons is strong, but you have to be careful." John absorbed her words, a deep sense of fear creeping into his chest. He had always been a man of reason, someone who believed in taking control of a situation. But this was different. The power Lyra spoke of was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Could he control it without losing himself? Could he really use it to save everything he cared about? "What if I can't control it?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if it consumes me, like you said?" Lyra stepped closer to him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You have more strength than you think, John. But you need to trust in yourself. Trust that you can do this. If you don't, I'll lose." John nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words sink in. The responsibility he carried was overwhelming, not just for himself, but for the entire galaxy. He couldn't afford to fail, not when so much was at stake. The next few days were filled with preparations. John, Lyra, and the rest of their small group of resistance fighters worked tirelessly, readying themselves for the inevitable battle. John had seen many wars in his time, but this one felt different. This was a fight for the future of everything: the galaxy, the alliances, and the lives of countless people who had no idea what was coming. John could feel the pressure building as the time drew closer. He wasn't just fighting for his people. He was fighting for the lives of species he had never even met, species that depended on this fragile peace to survive. The rebellion had grown stronger, and John knew they would be met with overwhelming force. The final showdown was near. The night before the battle, John sat alone in his quarters. He tried to sleep, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. The images of the coming conflict flashed in his mind: screams, explosions, ships falling from the sky. He had fought in battles before, but this was different. The stakes were higher. The fate of everyone he cared about rested in his hands. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. He stood up, wiping his hands on his pants, and opened it. It was Lyra. "I just wanted to check on you," she said softly, stepping into the room. "You look like you haven't slept in days." John forced a small smile. "I haven't. I don't think I can. There's too much to do." Lyra nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder, a simple gesture that somehow felt like a promise. "We will win, John. You've come so far. I believe in you." John looked at her, feeling a surge of warmth despite the fear that still gripped his chest. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice raw. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't." Know if I can control it. If I can control myself. Lyra's eyes softened. Fear is natural, John. But it doesn't have to control you. We all have the power to choose what we do with it. You have a choice, and you've already chosen to stand with the people who need you. That's enough. The rest will follow. John nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over him. He didn't know what the future held, or if he would survive, the battle ahead. But he knew one thing. He couldn't give up. Not now. Not when everything depended on him. Lyra gave him one last look of encouragement before leaving the room. John stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Tomorrow they would face the rebellion head-on. Tomorrow the fate of the galaxy would be decided. But for tonight, John took a deep breath and made his choice. He would fight. He would face whatever came his way and hold on to the hope that he could make a difference. The battle had arrived. John stood on the command deck of their ship, staring out at the vast expanse of space. His heart was heavy, his thoughts clouded with the weight of the decision he had made. The galaxy's future rested on his shoulders, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what was to come. But there was no turning back now. Lyra stood beside him, her presence steadying him as always. The light from the distant stars reflected in her violet eyes, making them seem even more intense, as if she could see through to the heart of the universe itself. She had never looked more determined. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice calm, yet filled with a quiet strength that John admired. John nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I don't have a choice anymore. We fight, or we lose everything." The ship was preparing for the final assault on the rebellion's stronghold. The fleet was ready. Though small in number, they had the element of surprise. John had led their forces through countless challenges, but this would be their greatest test. The rebellion had gathered its strength and was ready to crush any resistance that stood in their way. The final battle was upon them, and John knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. "We've trained for this," Lyra said softly, her eyes locked on John's. "Trust yourself. You have the power, John. I believe in you." Her words were like a spark that reignited something deep within him. John had felt the pull of the power Lyra had shown him, the energy that flowed through him, a force that was beyond his understanding. He had learned to harness it, to control it, but he had never felt fully ready. But with Lyra's encouragement, something shifted in him. The fear that had gripped him for so long began to fade. "Thank you," John whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't do this without you." Lyra smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "You don't have to do it alone." The call to battle was sounded, and John's heart pounded in his chest as the ship launched into the darkness of space. The battle was set to take place over the desolate world that had once been a neutral zone, an empty, lifeless planet that now served as the base of the rebellion's forces. John's hands gripped the eye controls as the ship soared toward the battlefield. He could feel the energy within him pulsing, alive. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As they approached the enemy stronghold, the view from the window was filled with enemy ships, massive, intimidating, and ready for war. "We're almost there," John said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "Are we sure this is the right plan?" Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "This is the only way. You know what to do. Trust yourself." John didn't respond. He couldn't. The moment had come. The first shots rang out, and chaos erupted in the skies above the planet. The rebellion's fleet was relentless, and John could hear the shouts of his commanders over the comms as they engaged the enemy forces. The sound of explosions echoed through the ship as laser fire streaked through the darkness. John's ship weaved through the fire, dodging the enemy's attacks with precise skill. His hands moved swiftly across the controls, guiding them through the chaos. He felt the power surge within him, the energy he had been learning to control, but now it was something more. It was raw, untamed, and it filled him with a strength he had never known before. Suddenly, an alarm blared, and John's heart skipped a beat. A massive enemy vessel appeared on their radar, bearing down on them with devastating speed. The ship was too large to avoid, and John knew that if they didn't act quickly, they would be destroyed. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers!" John shouted, his voice firm. But before he could react, Lyra stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She raised her hand, and the ship's engines hummed with power. The air around them seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself was bending under her command. "Hold on," Lyra said, her voice calm yet commanding. The power within John flared as Lyra unleashed a wave of energy that crackled through the ship. John felt it, felt the energy surge through his veins like fire, pushing him to the edge of his limits. The ship's engines roared as the light around them intensified, and the massive enemy vessel suddenly jerked to the side, veering off course as if something invisible had shoved it away. John stared in awe. "How did you—" "Your power, John," Lyra said softly, her gaze never leaving the battlefield. "It's in you. All of it. You just needed to let it out." The enemy vessel had been pushed off course, but it wasn't over. More enemy ships arrived, each one more powerful than the last. John knew they were in for the fight of their lives. But as the battle raged on, John felt something shift within him. The energy he had been learning to control was no longer a distant force. It was part of him, flowing through every fiber of his being. It was as though the galaxy itself had opened up to him, showing him the true nature of the power he held. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the energy wash over him. He could feel the ebb and flow of the battle, the lives at stake, the fate of the galaxy in his hands. He opened his eyes, and with a deep breath, he pushed the power forward. The battlefield seemed to freeze for a moment. John extended his hand toward the enemy ships, and the energy surged from him like a tidal wave. The enemy vessels were pushed back, their shields collapsing under the intensity of the force. John's heart raced as the power swelled within him, but this time he felt no fear. The power was his to command. He could feel it, the strength of his ancestors, the hope of the galaxy, all flowing through him. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, he was fighting for something greater. The enemy fleet began to retreat, their ships scattered and disorganized. John's forces pushed forward, rallying around him as he led the charge. The rebellion, once poised to dominate the galaxy, was now in retreat. The battle was won. As the enemy ships disappeared into the darkness of space, John let out a breath. He didn't realize he had been holding. The galaxy was safe, for now. But John knew that the fight for peace was never truly over. There would always be those who sought power, who wanted to control the future. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "You did it," she said softly. John nodded, his mind still racing. "We did it. Together, they had changed the future." But John knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to face. But for the first time, he felt ready. The galaxy's future was uncertain, but John knew one thing for sure. He would fight for it, no matter the cost.